In this video, we're going to really get into DOM manipulation with jQuery. So the DOM is the document object model, and basically just represents the map of elements on an HTML page. Okay, so that includes the head and body tags, the any paragraphs, headings, just anything that is in your web page. And we can add items to the DOM, we can remove, we can change them, we can add attributes, whatever it may be, we can do that with jQuery. Alright, so to start off here, let's create a div and give it an ID of D1. Okay, and then we'll have another div with an ID of D2. Okay, so just blank divs. Now, let's say that we want to add some text into this div here. Okay, without editing the HTML, we want to do it through jQuery. So we can just use our D1 ID, and we can say .text. Okay, we've done this before, and we'll say hello world. Reload, and we get hello world. So we can add stuff, we can add text to our document object model using jQuery. So let's say we want to add HTML. So we'll get our D2 and we'll do .html, and we can actually just put in HTML tags in here like this, and that'll give us an H1. Now if we were to do that in text, that's going to actually print out the tags. Okay, so just remember that if you want to actually use HTML, you need to use HTML and not text. Alright, now we also can interact with input values. So let's say we have an input, and we'll give this an ID of I1, and let's give it a type of text. Okay, so what we can do is we can target that input with I1, and if we want to mess with the value, we can use val. Okay, so in here we'll say hello world. Reload, and now our input has the value of hello world. Now it's important to know that these text, HTML, val, these actions go both ways. So if we want to get the text or the HTML or the value, we can easily do that as well. For instance, if we want to alert D1 dot text and reload, and you can see we get hello world. So you can get the text and you can set the text. Same with HTML and val. Okay, I'm just going to comment that out. Now we can also work with attributes. Okay, so let's say that D1, we want to give this an attribute. All right, and let's say we want to give it a class. We can do that through jQuery. So we'll say D1 dot attr, or attr, and we want to pass in first the name of the attribute. Let's say class, and then the value we'll just say something. So now if we save that, reload, we're not going to see any difference here. And then if we open up a console here with F12, and let's go ahead and examine this D1, and you'll see it has a class of something. Okay, so that was added through jQuery. Alright, now we can also remove attributes. So let's say D1 dot remove attr, and then just pass in the name of the attribute you want to remove. Let's say class, reload, and now if we look at that D1, it doesn't have that class anymore. Okay, it was removed. Now the next methods I want to talk about is append and prepend. So we're going to, let's add some line breaks here, and then I want to create an unordered list, and let's just give it, we'll give it an ID of list1, And let's put some list items in here. Okay, so we have an unordered list with 4 list items. So if we want to use append, we can actually add onto this list. So let's go ahead and use our selector here, the ID list1, and we're going to say dot append, and in here we're going to put in some li tags, and let's say last item. Okay, because since it's append, it's going to add on to the end. So if I reload, you can see this one is last item. Okay, and at the same time we have prepend if you want to add to the beginning. So let's change this to prepend, and then let's change the text here to first item. Reload, and you'll see that that was prepended and it's the first item in the list. So that's append and prepend. We also have before and after. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this, and we're going to change that to before, and let's go ahead and change this to a paragraph, and in here we'll just say before list. Reload, and you can see that was placed before the list. Okay, if we look at down here, we have the UL, and then the paragraph is right before it. Okay, so append and prepend is going to put it inside here. Before and after will be on the outside. Okay, so if I go ahead and copy that, change that to after, and reload, and you can see that's put in directly after the unordered list. Okay, so we can also remove stuff. So let's say list1, and we'll do dot remove, reload, and the entire UL is gone. You can see that nothing's in between these paragraphs. So it removes not only that element, but all of its nested elements. Now we also have one called empty, and let's go ahead and paste that in and say empty, and let's see what happens. If we look at the markup, you'll see that the UL is there. Okay, so what it does is it empties all the child elements, so there's no LIs inside. Okay, so that's the difference between remove and empty. Remove will get rid of the whole thing, empty will get rid of its children. Alright, now we're going to move on to working with CSS and manipulating CSS. So up at the top here, I'm just going to create a couple styles. So we'll have a class called red, and basically we just want the color to be red, and let's create a class called green, and we're going to set color to green. Alright, so to add a class to something is really easy. So let's take that D1 for example, okay, which is that first div. So ID D1, let's say dot add class, and then the name of the class is red. So if we go and we reload, you'll see that now the D1 text is red. Okay, so we can simply add a class. Now we can also remove a class. So what I'm going to do is in the HTML, this div with the ID of D2, let's give it a class of green. So that's going to go ahead and make that green. Now if we wanted to remove it, we could simply say D2 dot remove class, and then pass in the class we want to remove, which is green. And now if we reload, it's no longer green. We can also toggle classes. So let's create a button up here under the UL. and let's give it an ID of MyBTN. Okay, and then down here we're going to grab it, ID MyBTN dot click function, and let's see, let's toggle the D2, which is the hello world. Well, they're all hello worlds, but the hello world heading. So ID D2, and then we're going to say dot toggle class, and then the name of the class, which will be green. So now if we reload, and then as I click this, you'll see that the hello world heading goes from green to black. Okay, so we can toggle classes. All right, and we're using color, but obviously your classes can include whatever styles you want. Now we can also apply CSS, which we have done, but just to remind you, let's say we'll take D1, and let's say .css, and we'll say background, and we'll make that background pink. So now if I reload, you'll see that we have added a background style through jQuery without having to add any kind of style CSS. Okay, another thing we can do is manipulate height and width of elements. So let's say D1 dot width, and let's set it to 150. Okay, if we reload, you can see now it's set to 150, and obviously we can also do height, which I'll set to 50. Okay, so we can easily manipulate the dimensions here. All right, we also have a method called replace with. So let's do, we'll say D2, and we'll say dot replace with, and that's exactly what it does. It'll replace this element with whatever we want. So let's say we want H2. We'll just say replaced. Reload, and now you can see that it's no longer in, what was it, an H1 with hello world. It's now an H2 with the text replaced. Now we can also wrap things in elements. So let's say the LIs. We want to grab all of the LIs, and let's say dot unwrap. And what that's going to do is it's going to take its containing element, which is obviously a UL, and get rid of it. So now if we reload and look at the markup down here, you'll see all of our LIs, they're no longer wrapped in the UL. Okay, and at the same time we can also wrap stuff. So let's say D2, and then dot wrap, and let's just wrap it in a div. Okay, we'll save, reload, and now D2, let's see, div. Oh, we no longer have the D2 because we replaced it. So let me just comment out the replace with. Okay, so now if we look at D2, we have a div around it. Okay, the div with no ID or class. So you can see that manipulating the DOM is really helpful and also really easy. So in the next video, we're going to start to look into effects, some of the different effects, and some simple animation with jQuery.